I feel like we've grazed through a very rich and satisfying meal, intellectually, emotionally, and culturally. And for our dessert, Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'll start right in with my talk, which is about the next web, the web after the web that we have. And I want to begin by reminding everybody that the web that we have is less than 5,000 days old. Okay? So everything that we now take for granted, satellite images of the Earth, your family tree, all patents, anyone's phone number, everything for sale, government forms, weather everywhere, all your friends, real-time stock quotes, newspapers, sports scores, for sale ads of everything you can imagine, real estate prices, library books, street maps, everything on auction, all movies, all regulations, Library of Congress, all this stuff has happened in 5,000 days. Okay? 5,000 days. So 5,000 days, this wasn't here. In fact, if I've told you 5,000 days ago that all this stuff would be here, you'd call me crazy. Because 5,000 days ago, we did not expect that. We thought the future was coming. And I know this from being at Wired. One of the things that we thought it was going to be was TV, but better. There are going to be large companies that were going to be downloading the stuff that we would just sort of draw on, suck on to. That's what it was going to be about. That's what we really expected. We did not expect the impossible. Because there is not enough money in the world to create all the stuff that I just told you about, that we have now. There's no economic model to explain how all this stuff could be generated and then given away for free. It is impossible. So one of the things that the web has taught us is we have to get better and believe in the impossible. Okay? So that's, for me, the major lesson, I think. So what's the next 5,000 days going to be? That's the question. If that's happened in the last 5,000 days, what will the next 5,000 days bring us? It's kind of hard to even imagine. And I think I have a couple suggestions about what that might be. First of all, I think we're headed to the point where we can imagine it being very much global. We all know about the fact that all our competitors and everybody else in the world is only 1/8 of a second away. That's the time it takes for the speed of light to go around the Earth. So everything is just basically 1/8 of a second away. That's one way in which it's global. But there's another way in which we're global, and that is we have a single internet. We have, if you can imagine the internet, basically this is kind of a representational map of all the nodes in the internet. In fact, this is actually a map of the internet. This is a map of the backbones of all the internets, and this is what it looks like from afar. I think some of the blue is probably North American trunk lines. But basically what you want to think about is that we have basically one machine. There is only one computer. All the computers in the world are connected up together, and they're acting as if they're just one computer. So that's the computer that we're programming for. That's the thing that we're actually now working on. That's the thing that's going to count. There's just really only one computer. So several things to say about this. One is that this is the most reliable machine we've ever made because it's not been down. There's no other machine that's run that long for that many hours without ever going down. And so it's made, in a very curious way, it's made from imperfect, unreliable parts connected together to make the most reliable thing we have. Maybe that's post-enlightenment, I don't know. But if we want to think about it as a whole, we can kind of think about it as if it was one literal organism, one machine. And one of the things about it is it does about 100 billion clicks per day. And it contains about 55 trillion links between all the pages of the web pages in the world. And if we keep going on that, we can count up the fact that there was 1 billion PC chips, and it does 2 million emails, and 8 terabytes per second of traffic, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge, huge machine. And it uses 5% of the world's electricity to keep it going. So it's a very, very large beast. And if you take these specifications as if it were sort of if we were kind of specifying it as if it was for sale on Amazon, a very curious thing happens is that I noticed that there's about 100 billion clicks per day and 55 synapses, that the rough order of magnitude of this machine is very equivalent to the size and the scale of the human brain. Okay, almost the same number of neurons, almost the same number of synapses. Roughly, we've made a machine that's roughly, approximately in complexity to the level of the human brain. Because, in fact, this is how the web works. It's by associative memory. It's by the fact that it's connecting things here and there in the same way that the neurons in our brain work. However, your brain is not doubling every 2 years. On the contrary. Exactly. So, if you can think of right now the machine as being one human brain right now, 1 HB, it's going to be 6 billion HB 30 years from now, if not sooner. Okay? So basically, this machine will exceed the processing power of all humans on Earth within 30 years. Okay? So what I'm suggesting is that this is a very large machine. And so I want to just give 3 ideas about the nature of this one machine. Okay, the first thing about it is that we're giving it a body. We're embodying this machine, and that's one of the things that's going to happen in the next, I believe, the next 5,000 days. So, and the second thing is we're going to restructure the organization of our data and knowledge. And the third thing is that we're going to become very codependent upon it. So, embodiment. If we can think about all these gadgets that we have and carry in our pockets that we fill our living rooms with, if we think of all these gadgets, we think of them as separate right now, but really, in fact, what they are is that they're all windows into the same machine. They're all looking into the same machine. They're just all little portals into the same one machine. Okay, and that we can think of that as the cloud. Sometimes they talk about the cloud, so these little devices become cloud books instead of MacBooks. We're talking to the cloud. They will become sort of thin little, maybe they don't carry very much memory because everything happens on the machine that they're looking into. So the cloud book, we already have one with the one laptop computer. It basically doesn't have a hard drive. It just has to be connected, and once it's connected to the cloud, to the machine, it works. Everything. We have all the webs and movies and music of the world is all going onto, and these things, these cameras are becoming basically the eyeballs for this machine. And everything that we have will go through the web. And so here's an example of Grand Central, which does all your phones. So every phone record that you do, every phone call is recorded, and you can actually have web access to all your phone calls. That's how it should be. That's how it will be. Everything. Here's an example of, we know what's happening with Word documents and spreadsheets. Everything is going to the web. That's where it's going to work. That's the one machine that we're working on. In fact, at a point, the web will own every single bit. Lots of the bits that we're doing right now on word processors or spreadsheets aren't on the web, but they all will be. So the web is basically, you can think of it kind of like a black hole that's sucking up everything. All information, all data will go on to the web. So the whole thing will be all webized. Web is the OS. And I mean everything, not just the data stuff. I mean literally everything. So if you can take this picture, and you can imagine that everything in that, every light signal, every billboard, everything's happening, is all talking to the web. In fact, I just saw the other day the picture frames, these digital picture frames, they have a URL. You can email your pictures onto the frame. So I've been talking about this for a long time, that everything will have an email address. That's happening right now. Your doorknob will have an email address. Most hotels, they have computers in the doorknobs already, so why not? So everything is going on to the web. Shirts, clothes will have a little RFID tag in them, and you put them in the washing machine. The washing machine will know what to do with it. So we have the Internet of Things. So we have chips into shoes, and we have chips into cars, and cars have so much chips into them that we can think of them as chips with wheels. And shoes are chips with heels. Okay? So in the beginning of the digital economy, we thought that there was going to be this disembodied, separate informational world, cyberspace, that was disembodied. But in fact, what's happening really, it's not that there's two worlds, the world of the atoms and the world of the digital. What's happening really is that those two are coming together. Augmented reality, the idea that, in fact, everything that we have will have a little chip in it, and that dual world is the world that we're headed into, so everything has an informational basis. And that convergence is really what we're talking about, where the digital world and the atom worlds come together. And one of the things that actually means is the fact that all these separate medias that we're imagining as separate are actually converging. So that's the real convergence, is the fact that TV, film, videos, newspapers, books, magazines, all are basically only one platform. Basically, the behaviors, the rules that govern them all, Okay? So copies have no values. What's really valuable is the fact that things that can't be copied are where the value lies. When you have the world of copies, what you wanted to do is talk about things that can't be copied. And media wants to be liquid. This is another universal world of universal law of the media and network effects rules, which means that it's like the fax machine. You know about that, right? The first person who bought the fax machine was an idiot because there's nobody to fax to. So he becomes the evangelist for getting people to buy fax machines. So the more people that buy fax machines, the more valuable it becomes. That's the network effects. And attention is the currency, the only scarcity that we have, the most valuable thing. So those are the general rules that will apply to everything in the media world. So in the McLuhan version of the world was machines are extensions of the human senses, but we're actually kind of reversing that, and we're doing the humans are the extended senses of the machine. Okay? The number of, basically turning the world inside out. And so we become basically the senses for this one machine. 1 trillion eyes, ears, touches, all this peripheral stuff becomes the embodiment for this machine. Okay? So the second thing that's happening is the restructuring of this world through this one machine. Okay, the first revolution in this whole digital era was the fact that we linked all the computers, and that we called that the net. That was a big, big thing. Take all these computers and link them together. You know, we can just see it in our head. That's what we thought the internet was about. And there was a lot of resistance. People were kind of really afraid at first of linking all their computers together. Oh my gosh, what will happen? You know, and so, you know, this is what it looked like, and there was a lot of resistance and fear about linking all the computers together. And the second version of this was sharing packets. You had to share your packets if you were going to be on the network. Oh, share my packets, I don't know. Okay, but this is what happened. So the second one was linking pages. That's the revolution, that's the thing that we're in right now. Everybody has pages and you link them together, that makes the web. You know, we link them all together, and so there was resistance about linking your pages together. People were very concerned about that, copyright, all these other kind of issues. Can I link my pages, make them for free, share my pages? I'm not sure. Okay, and so in the beginning, you know, people would put out, the companies would have a website, and you'd come to your website, and so that was the big step forward, that you can share you open up this information for a flight that was used to be very guarded and sold for a lot of money. You open it up, and now there's a big step. You've realized by sharing the information that made it more valuable. That was a big step. And you shared links. Okay, so that was part of what the web was about. Now the third one that we're headed into, that we haven't gotten there yet, that we're going to, this is about data. Sharing your data, which is even more personal, which is even more intimate, which is even more, has even more resistance at. And when we do this, we're going to get this one machine. That's what this one machine is about. So rather than just, of course, just linking pages together, what we're going to do is we're actually going to link every idea and every little noun in every page to each other. That's a bigger thing. So we're going to go from not just going from a page to page, we're going from an idea to another idea. It's a much finer resolution, and it's much scarier when you actually begin to do this, because it means you're giving up even more of what people think of as their gems, as the data itself. So rather than right now, what that means is that we're going to link this Internet of Things, we're going to link to not just we're going to link to the thing itself in the sense that it has a chip in it, so we're linking to it. So not just finding out about your flight in the general sense of a web page on the airline company's web page, but we're actually going to go to the flight itself, maybe to that very seat. There'll be a link to it. We're going to go right to that information itself so that I can have access to that itself. So here's a good example. I live in Pacifica, and right now the web doesn't know anything about Pacifica. It's just another word. But in this coming way, this data, anytime it comes across that word Pacifica, my town, it will know that it's a town. It will know this is the same town in California. It will become aware of that because we will teach it and say, anytime this word appears, it's always going to be this. It's going to be this little cove here. And it will, in a certain sense, know that, and in a certain sense, make it smarter by the fact that we have reduced it to that level. These are some of the acronyms you're going to see a lot of. These are the acronyms that are going to be used in the semantic web. And these are some of the companies. This is Web 2.0, the idea that all the social sites, all right? These are all the social sites that are up there right now. And each time you go to one of these, you have to tell who your friends are again. Duh. I mean, why should you do that? It's crazy. The web should know. You should tell it once, okay? So it should know who you are. You should be a unique individual, and then you know it's your friends, and anytime you go, it should recognize who you are and who your friends are. That's what we're talking about. So you have all these things put into a universal database. So you can think of this as the worldwide database. You can think about it as the data web, as the semantic web, as the Web 3.0. These are all names for the same thing. It's this idea of putting everything down into their most primitive informational atomic elements and then reassembling them. So that's the semantic web. Web 3.0, the giant global graph, these are all names for the same thing. And these are all attempts to take this more intimate version of things and link them together in new ways. And you're sharing data, which people feel uncomfortable at first by doing, but will increase in value when we do it. So not just virtual things, but everything we have, every location, geocoding, everything that we manufacture, those SKUs, everything about it, the whole course, the whole history of where it was manufactured, all its ingredients, everything about it becomes and flows into this database. And that is what is going to generate this next realm of wealth, is when we reassemble and recombine all these really bits of information in an intelligent way. The database of things. And the fourth, as I said, is to link the entire world. Not just the virtual things, but the physical things, this Internet of Worlds. So that we're going right, not just to the airline front page, but right to our seat in terms of having that resolution of data. So everything there, and basically what you want to be able to think of is that the web is going to be around us. We're going to be in the web. The web is not something out there. We're going to be surrounded. We're going to live inside this machine. We're going to live inside this web because everything we see will be connected to it and be part of it. That is going to produce the third thing, which is codependency. Because Dave was just talking about his girl, why is your iPhone so smart? Well, what happens when you take your iPhone away? I had a friend, they have an 18-year-old daughter or 16-year-old daughter, and then she was grounded for some really serious infraction, and they took her cell phone away, and she became physically sick. No, she was like amputation. It was like amputating her. She just could not get through the day. And so, an always-on world, okay, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about always on, okay? And, I liked being able to find out myself, self-monitoring. This is actually turns out if you let Google monitor you, you can find out all kinds of things about you. This is my search activity generalized for the hours of the day, and so around 10 or 11 is apparently when I do the most searching. I didn't know that about myself, but Google let me know because I am always on. So one of the things we have to realize is that total personalization requires total transparency. Okay, those two things, we can't have everything tailored to us unless we're going to be radically transparent to it. So that's the deal that we're kind of entering into, and most of us are not really ready for that. But total personalization requires total surveillance, basically. Okay, so Google is there, and I'm finding that it's much easier for me to just Google something than try to remember it. So I don't even bother trying to remember it. I'll just Google it. It's much easier than trying to recall. So I'm actually become dependent on Google in that sense, and we think, oh, how horrible. But actually think about writing. Writing is a technology. How dependent we are to write things down, to remember things. What if we took writing away? Could we operate? No, we could. If we couldn't read and write, could we be ourselves? Well, I think the same thing is happening with Google. Google is another technology like writing, which is so instrumental to our culture, so foundational that we can't even separate it out. We're completely codependent upon reading and writing. I mean, the alphabet permeates this room to the degree that we're not even aware of. There's hardly a thing made that doesn't have this technology called writing put it onto it. And we're going to do the same thing with chips and put it into the one machine. And so we will become incredibly dependent upon it. And, Larry Page has said, the founder, he says what they're really trying to do at Google is really make an AI. Okay, that's very explicit. Okay, so when 6 billion humans search Google, who's really searching who? So it's a real codependency there. We are the web. We are the web, we're in the web. The two of them are pretty symbiotic. So that's what I think is going to be the next 5,000 days. It's not the web only better. It's really something different. Okay, it's really we're talking about something that's really kind of it's smarter. It's more personalized. It's more ubiquitous. But you could also think of it as sort of like an organism. This is the Volux. This is kind of this is it's one machine. That's what we're dealing with. We're making one machine. So what to do about it? What can we do about it? Well, I have a couple suggestions. Just to end this right here. There's only one machine. The web is this OS. All screens look into the one. No bits will live outside the web. To share is to gain. Let the one read it. And the one is us. Thank you. Questions? Xander. Have I heard this one before?
Thank you, Kevin. I've seen some of that, but not all of it, and it was really great to see it. You touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear a little bit more of what you think about where nostalgia fits into this world. I mean, I purposefully own the latest model car I can that has no computers in it, because it's a 4x4 that I use in off-road conditions where if it fails in a way that the one web I'm not connected to, I need to be able to fix it. And vinyl has transcended. Vinyl LPs will transcend CDs, right? They already have, and they will continue to do so. So there's clearly a nostalgia thing that exists in this world, and you touched on it when you said that these things have value. These are the things that are going to become valuable. But I'm curious as to where those things fit into your world.
So generally, I find the answer to these kind of questions about this kind of digital world is always all of the above. That's an option. The option to drop out, the option to become like the Amish, the option to live simply is always there. And it's actually very easy to do. I mean, it's very easy to, people say it's hard, but it's not. It's very easy to unplug your TV. It's very easy to not have a car, to live somewhere in the woods. And that option is always there. And what's surprising is how few people actually take it, because once you start to live like that for any length of time, you realize that, in fact, the reason why we have all this stuff is because we have options and possibilities, and you're restricting your possibilities when you go back in time. And so I think we should always make sure that we have those alternatives and we don't eradicate them, that there should be somewhere to be off, that we can retreat, that we can duck out. And so I think personally, it's a very good habit to take sabbaticals from this technology to unplug. And I think that the more often you do it, the easier it is to do it. So I think those options will be there, and I think nostalgic is a very strong force, and it's a very strong market force, and that there will always be. I mean, here's another thing I've discovered. I tried to find some technology that was no longer available to purchase, and I could not find anything that you couldn't buy now. They're still making parts for steam cars. You can buy a flint-knapped blade like the cavemen made on eBay for $50. In fact, there are more people making stone points right now than there ever were before. It's true. There are more blacksmiths now than there ever were before, just by sheer numbers. There are more people making swords. There are more people making telescopes by hand than ever before. So all these things still exist. So these are just options that they're actually facilitated by the web, because you actually can find them now. You can find these guys making the most obscure thing, and they're being made new, and they're being made in some cases as good or better than they were before. So those options still all exist. Ken.
Talk so much since there aren't other questions. Ken Wilson from the Christensen Fund. Kevin's fabulous. Your account of the dynamics in the system and what's to come, is devastatingly effective. So my question is, what can shape that? Is this an inevitable process? And obviously there are two kinds of things that immediately come to mind, which is the agency of human beings. Do we completely lack agency in motivation and so on? And is that because there are so many of us in this system that the average of it is going to knock it out or whatever? But also, as human beings, we're still savanna primates.
Right. So I would.
Can you repeat that?
All right, I'll try. Ken Wilson at the Christensen Fund. As you describe this process, it has a kind of inevitable drive, and I can see that pattern. So the question becomes, is this really unshapeable? And it comes out into two areas. Do people not have some kind of agency? Is there not some kind of motivation or some kind of cultural ideas or forces that shape history? They certainly appear to have done in the past. Couldn't they shape this forward? Or is the level of participation? I mean, you can't, can we have a Hitler on the web? Perhaps we can't have a Hitler on the web because of the very properties of this machine that, be edited out on Wikipedia, so to speak. But also on the other side of that, we as human beings, as we engage in this process, we're still savanna primates. We might have an ability to have 1 million friends, but as we show when we do these studies, we still have about the same number of friends as we had when we were hanging out in the savannah, eating nuts and hunting buffaloes. But then there's another side to it, which is that context, the impact of context. Again, we know from history that contingency, that chance, that other kinds of dynamics hugely affected the rise and fall of economic systems and of the pattern of power in the world. So something is going on, and something has gone on in the past. Is there nothing that could go on over the next 30 years that would derail or send us in another direction? So how do you deal with this unrolling forward?
So in biology, there's two kinds of trajectory or phases. There's evolutionary, and then there's development. And evolutionary things are not inevitable, but development ones are. So an example of development would be the trajectory of an infant being an animal, a mammal, being born, is that assuring that they live, that they will eventually go through a certain inevitable number of phases: adolescence, maturity, reproduction. And so how they individually do that, there's a matter of free choice, but they will go through those developmental phases. And I believe that this one machine is a developmental inevitability, but just as, say, becoming an adolescent would be for an infant, but how a person is and acts as an adolescent, is a subject of choice. So we have a choice of what kind of one machine that we're going to make, but I don't think we have much choice that there will be one machine. So the kinds of choices we have, well, there's lots of choices. There's choices, I mean, like right now, I think we're in a battle right now with like intellectual and property issues about how those kinds of things have a huge influence on the kind of culture and the kind of machine that we make. Is it open and transparent? Does it allow creativity, or is it more controlled and it's shaped by the powers of few? That's a decision that we have. So we can affect the quality of the one machine, but I don't think we can affect the fact that there will be one machine. So, and to the second point about the fact that we're still primate animals that are governed by kind of biological contingencies and issues from the past is true. So, and I think that we will, because those urges are so foundational, that we will basically not adopt and spread technology that doesn't suit that. Technologies can come up, and unless people buy them, unless people like them, they're going to die. The ideas don't go away. They're still there, but they just don't become widely adopted. So I think there is a sense of it has to fit some way with us. And in the long term, not the 10-year horizon, but the long term, of course, we will re-engineer ourselves to, in some capacity or another, either to fit the technology or in other ways. But that's way beyond. That's not in the local horizon. But I think that is another adaptation, is that we are not static. For a long time, people thought that the human evolution had actually stopped, but the recent studies show again that we were wrong, that in fact, even with culture, the biological selves are still evolving. And so we're a work in process. And we may even engineer ourselves to adapt to this technology in the long term. But in the short term, I think it's still going to fit. We're just not going to, things that, that don't fit our hands, it's simply not going to buy. Yeah.
Hi, Gordon Knox, Stanford Humanities Lab. I just have a question about how this fits into some of the bleaker scenarios we're looking at on a global level, and just how much, if we are running out of water, air, and so forth, if that type of, or overpopulating, or these sort of extreme pressures on the very physical ingredients of the globe, how does the big machine, imagine it could work its way through it, or is it conceivable that actually we could blow that?
Well, one of the things I would say is that the big machine wants basically the same thing that we want. The big machine needs clean water. It needs it needs happy people, and so it's in the interest of the big machine to have a clean environment. It cannot sustain itself over the long term with toxins, and therefore basically the wants or the agenda of the machines are in sync with life. It's not antagonistic to life. I think that's I think it's I should say it's like I think of technology like children. Okay, so there are certain things that your teenager might want, and those urges might be kind of primeval, but we don't have to surrender to all those urges. We have to kind of be aware of those urges, and then we have to sort of manage and refine those urges. And I think the same thing with technology. It's kind of like an adolescent. I think it has some tendencies that, if left unchecked, would not be good for it, that would actually be bad for itself, but that fundamentally down deeper, that the wants of technology are in alignment with the wants of life.
Just to push back on that one, it is conceivable that actually the machine is very much a reflection, and it is, of us, right. and the types of motivations and sequences that we program our own social organizations around. So if it were the case that the Tata Mobile, not only in India but throughout China was just felt to be a birthright of human beings, and that huge influx of internal combustion engines spinning around could in fact push us over the edge. Isn't it possible that the machine, as it were, would encourage the distribution and sale and acquisition of this automobile, at the same time not registering or not fully processing the downside consequence?
Well, as I try to emphasize, at least in this period, it's symbiotic. We are part of the web. The machine needs. We're part of the search engine. We're part of where it senses. And so it's not that the machine. There's a machine and there's us and we're separated. We are part. So the human life and our own interests and our own desire for quality of life around the world are an essential part of this equation. And so, to the degree that there is something that we should do, which is that we have to be clear about what it is that we want. And that when we can do that, we can use the machine, and that fundamentally the machine is in alignment, and that if we want to have a clean earth, then that is good. Good for the machine, good for us. I'm just saying that there's no inherent antagonism between the two. But we do have to make it happen.
It's the structure of the feedback loops over
Right,
time.
exactly.
From a mathematical point of view,
It's
the boy and the sports car.
Right.
They can be incredibly in tune over one time scale,
Right.
but over, the next corner.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Gonna wait for the mic
And I'll bring it back to you. I'll bring it back to you.
because every bit should be recorded.
Yes, that's right. The machine wants it all.
I said every bit should go into the machine. Thank you, machine. Kevin, that's probably one of the most thought-provoking presentations I've ever heard. I absolutely loved it. And I really look at this element of the codependency, and I'm inspired by the potential of incredibly increased utility of everything around us, and frightened by the prospect of the dependency upon that, and should the one machine be controlled by, the wrong forces. So that's as thought-provoking as anything, and I'll be thinking about that for a long time. Thanks. The one thing I look at as an arts program officer working with the Irvine Foundation that I see as one realm that's even more specific to my work is you mentioned that the value is in the uncopyable.
Right,
Can you speak more to what is uncopyable?
Sure.
And what that value looks like? That fascinated me. As
So
one
actually,
thing.
I just did a posting on that's called Better Than Free, which actually kind of lay out this. But the idea, of course, is that the Internet's basically the world's largest copy machine, and that anything that can be copied that's brought near it will be copied, that is sort of like superconductivity, electricity, that once it comes on, it just never goes away, it just kind of keeps going. So what the Internet does is copy. And that in this superabundance of copies, that the value of a copy almost kind of comes to zero. So the only way to really make money, to have value, is to produce things that cannot be copied. And so I think there's about 8 general things, general traits. I call them generatives because we don't have a good word for not copyable and a nice positive. So I call them generatives because they actually have to be kind of grown in place. So one of the ones that it would be like immediacy. So you know that if you just wait around, that eventually you'll get a copy of something, whatever it's music or a book or a movie. But if you want it like right now, as soon as it comes out, maybe as soon as they produce it, you'll pay for it. So you're going to pay for immediacy. Okay, so another one would be personalization. So yeah, you'll eventually get a free copy of that of music, but if you wanted it tuned to suit the acoustics of your living room, you'll pay. Or if you want a book that's signed, or in some ways tailored to you or what you know or your past reading habits or whatever it is, that personalization is you'll pay that instead of getting a free copy or on top of getting a free copy. Okay, another one might be authentication, free software. Oh yeah, eventually you'll get the free software, but is it really as good? Is it really does it work? Does it have any bugs? Or drugs, for that matter? Yeah, you can get free copies of drugs, but are you really willing to pay to have the authentic version of it? Maybe the generics are pretty good, but I'm willing to pay. So authentication is another one. A fourth one would be what I call accessibility. So, you know, ownership sucks in some respects because, like, if you own all this music and you get the movies, you got to back it up, you've got to catalog it, you've got to keep going. And even though it's all maybe free, you know, I might actually pay someone to have access to all the music in the world anytime I want to, or to just give me any movie that I can think of right now, even though I could get it on my own later on somewhere else if I want to hunt through it and blah, 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 blah. So accessibility is another thing we might pay for. That can't be copied, really. I mean, it's just kind of, it has to be localized in some respects. And so, and the first one is, the last one I call kind of maintenance or interpretation. And the great famous example in Silicon Valley is software free, manual $1,000, okay? So it's like, okay, in order to understand how to use this, to get through it, you need a sort of level of expertise and guidance, even though the thing itself is for free. Or your genes are going to come this way right now. They're $1,000 to get your genes sequenced, but eventually it'll cost nothing to get your genes sequenced, and it'll cost $1,000 just to get them interpreted. To get the sequences interpreted, because they don't mean anything unless you can interpret them, and that's the hard part. So just getting in sequence will be free. So those are the kinds of examples that I'm talking about.
Where do we find the article?
I think if you actually just Google "better than free" at this point, you might even find it. But it's on my website, Kevin Kelly, "Better Than Free." So there's some other aspects of the media laws, but that's one of the things that regulate this world where there's free copies.